So I've been on my art journey for about 11 years now, and I am not ashamed to admit that I'm starting over because I feel like I kind of learned things incorrectly the first time. So towards the end of last year, decided to let go of the Instagram account that I had been building for the past 8 years. And I had grown it to about 10,000 followers, and then it just flatlined for like 3 years. That number did not move. And I was trying a bunch of stuff, experimenting. I was all over the place. It was chaotic. I felt like I reached a block in my creative journey and I just wasn't making the kind of progress that I wanted to make. And so I was just like, let's just start over. Let's refresh and let's approach things differently. I reflected on everything that I had learned up until that point and tried to engineer a plan and approach of how I was going to do things differently this time around. So started a new art account, starting off fresh, and I realized that the thing that I really want to focus on is just generally becoming a better storyteller. Because I love storytelling in all its different forms, but visually specifically because I'm a visual artist, amongst many other things. And so I was like, all right, that's what I am going to focus on. And I'm going to focus on trying to create the work that I genuinely want to create and the work that really lights me up. And we assume that we do this, like, oh, we get into art because we love it. But it's so easy to get caught up in shoulds and I should be doing this and I should be doing that and that's popular and I should focus on that. But really honing in on what I genuinely care about has been an absolute game changer for me. And so these are the 3 tips that I'm kind of keeping in mind on my own kind of reboot of my art journey, as I'm gonna call it. So as we're chatting about this, you're gonna watch me paint this illustration right here. And before we get into the tips, I wanted to really just dive into the backstory of this illustration. You know, it's lore, if you will. But if that's something you're not interested in and you just wanna get to the tippy tips, no problem. You can skip to the timestamp that you feel is most relevant to you. Take what resonates, leave the rest. But yes, let's dive in. Okay, so I am super excited to introduce you guys to my OC Sapphire. I am kind of obsessed with her. But basically how the idea for this character came about was this year, according to, the Chinese New Year or the Lunar New Year calendar, it's the year of the blue snake, or more specifically like the wood snake. But the color blue is associated with wood. And for me, I was like, wood snake doesn't sound as glamorous as blue snake. I like blue snake. And then I was watching a video by one of my favorite artists, Haeyoon, and I think she's a Korean artist, and she did just like a simple piece of, it's the year of the blue snake, commemorating the fact that it's the year of the blue snake. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I got inspired in the sense that I was like, what if I designed a character inspired by this year's theme? And then Sapphire was born. And when you meet somebody that you're like, you, my friend, have just changed my entire life. A little dramatic, but that's exactly how I felt as she kind of came together. And I was like, there is something more to this character. There is an entire story here, I'm sure of it. And so I listened because as I have been training my intuition over the past couple of years, I know that when something hits me, I just have to sit with it. I have to listen. I have to be open. And in time, something is going to come together. So I felt it. I was like, oh, there's something special about this one. So I was open. I listened. Didn't have to wait too long. Sure enough, I felt like her story started to emerge and it's still emerging and developing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is something I'm super excited about and I want to explore more. So I just kind of decided to embark on a personal project that really allows me to explore her story, explore her world, and that leads us to the very first point of this video. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is pick a project that you're actually excited about. Something I feel we don't talk about enough is just how much frustration is actually baked into the learning experience. So when you're learning something new, it's going to be a process of really like struggling with that thing and experiencing a lot of uncomfortable emotions because you're gonna wanna do the thing, but then you're gonna try it and then it's not gonna be coming out right. And so motivation and a strong why is so important to really support you on the learning journey. And so in that vein, having a project that you can work on that you're excited about can serve as a strong why for you. Okay, so why am I recommending a project in particular? I believe creativity requires you to kind of find a balance and flow between two things, and that's exploration and focus. We should generally be constantly open and exploring different things and trying different things because all that input really feeds into our creative practice and our creativity. It expands our minds to possibilities, but we also need to take all of that and really channel it and have a focus that we can direct our efforts and our energy into. So creativity is sort of that balance between exploration and focused, dedicated work. So this video doesn't really cover the exploration side of things, although we do touch on it a little bit, but more so the focus element, because this is where the real learning happens. And so I believe picking a project that you are excited about is a really powerful tool to help you narrow your focus. So what do I mean when I refer to having a project? Essentially, this is something that has a very clear, tangible outcome. It's also something that's made up of a series of milestones, you know, things that you can celebrate along the way, those little like, yeah, I did it moments. And it's something that's going to require you to commit over an extended period of time. So for example, a project that you could do is like complete an entire sketchbook. Maybe you just never finish any of your sketchbooks, but you've always wanted to have like a completed sketchbook that you could flip through and just like see all the different pages. At the end of it, the tangible result that you would have is like a completed sketchbook. And milestones are things like completing a page a day or something, whatever you want to look at. But like if you complete a page of your sketchbook, you're like, yeah, you can celebrate that. And it's something that requires you to commit over an extended period of time because you cannot finish a sketchbook in a day unless you're on the last page. But really, it's something you're gonna have to commit to over an extended period of time. For me personally and my personal project, it's kind of twofold because I'm a bit of an overachiever. I'm just kidding. I was so average at school. Or maybe I overachieve, or I'm very like, oh, I really want to do well in stuff I care about. I suck at doing stuff that I just don't care about. So I'm gonna be basic. I'm gonna be so basic. I'm gonna pull my punches if I don't care. But if I do, then I go all in. So for my project, it's kind of twofold, like I said, and I want to actually write this story because I love books. I love books so much. I've always loved books. When I was younger, my favorite place to be was like my school's library. That was back in primary school, and I was just always there reading all the books. And so I am fascinated by storytelling in all its forms, but writing in particular really captivates me because I'm so fascinated by the way authors are able to paint pictures with words. I'm like, how do y'all do that? Like, it's so magical for me, and it's something that I'm so interested in. I'd love to learn how to do that. So that's something that I am working on, just, you know, for myself. Lord knows how long that is gonna take, but that's one element of it. Another element is because I'm a visual artist primarily, a lot of the scenes and things that I see in my head, I also want to draw them. So I really want to create a series of illustrations around the story and potentially put those in an art book. So you know how like animated films or whatever tend to have like art of books? I have like the art of Tangled over here. I find that so interesting and like so fun to see like the process of developing these books. But I've never heard of like an art of book for a novel. But I would love to see that. And one of the reasons is because I finished the book Legends and Lattes. And after I was done with that book, I was like, I want to see the cafe. Like, I wish I could see the cafe and like people being inside it and like interacting. I wanted to see it. And I was just like, oh, wouldn't it be so cool if like there was a novel, especially fantasy novels, you know, because it's like a whole new world. It's like, wouldn't it be so cool if they had like an art of book? So I was like, okay, so this story that I'm working on, wouldn't it be fun if we had like an art book? We create a couple of illustrations, more than a couple, and maybe at the end of it, I compile it and I put it in a book, and maybe we got 2 books now. Like the novel and the actual, like the art book. So it's wild. I feel like it's a ridiculously ambitious project, but I'm gonna touch on that point as well when you stumble upon a project that feels like it's bigger than your current skill set. We're going to chat about it. But for me, that's what that looks like. So those are the tangible things that I'm working towards. It's going to take time. And within that, there are a bunch of little milestones that I can celebrate. Every time I make an illustration, I get excited. Every time I write a couple words of, you know, the story, I get excited and I can celebrate that. So how might you go about choosing this project, you might ask? If when I said pick a project that excites you, there wasn't anything that immediately popped up in your mind, that's okay. Like I mentioned, creativity is this balance between exploration and focus. And so what that tells me is that you just might need to spend a bit more time in the exploring phase and really trying different things. If you try to think about, oh, what excites me, that might be hard to sort of like pull up. Or if you're thinking about what am I passionate about, maybe a difficult question to answer, because I found that passion is actually cultivated over time. But something we do always have is stuff that we're curious about, stuff that intrigues us. And if you're an artist, that's probably art. You probably got into art because you have artists that you look at what they do and you're like, oh, that is fascinating. That is interesting. I'd love to be able to know how to do that. So I would say a good place to start is by really paying attention to the things that capture your attention. The way our minds work is that our conscious minds process about 40 to 50 bits of data per second, whereas our subconscious minds process about 11 million bits of data per second. That's a lot of information. So if in all of that information that your subconscious mind is constantly processing, something pops into your awareness that comes with a sense of like curiosity and expansion and like, oh, okay, that's interesting, then that's something that's really important to pay attention to. Don't sweep it under the rug like, oh yeah, it's nothing, it's not a big deal. No, it's everything. You've got to start paying attention to that stuff. You've got to start paying attention to the places where you really feel a sense of expansion and you're sort of leaning into that thing and there's a curiosity to it, because that's really going to guide you to super, super interesting places. So when you're picking your project, really prioritize your interests and your curiosities. So as I mentioned in the section about this illustration, Sapphire was actually inspired by the fact that it's the year of the blue snake. And that came from my fascination and interest with, you know, East Asian philosophies and cultures and, you know, how they do things that side. I think part of it is because, you know, I'm Malawian, born and raised here. And so African culture and Asian culture is very, very similar. So the way that I was raised and the way that I find a lot of like Asian people are raised in their households, I find like there's a similarity, and I feel a sense of like resonance with that. So I also am very fascinated in the way that they tell their stories. So that fascination really piqued my curiosity on, it was Chinese Lunar New Year, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then it just led to this idea for this character that's evolved into this whole story. So always follow your curiosities. So if your curiosity leads you to an idea that feels like it's beyond your current skill set, that's okay. That's actually important because that's how we are going to learn. And that's where the next point comes in. But I just want you to imagine for a second that you had absolutely no limitations to your skill set whatsoever. You could literally produce anything. What is it that you would want to create? And you also want to pay attention to anything that sticks with you. Like there could be something that just keeps coming back. As you explore things, you notice something just keeps coming back. That's also a really good indication that that would be a good project for you to pursue. So the next tip is to study the fundamentals according to the problems you encounter as you work on your project. So there are so many fundamentals that we want to nail down in art. So if you just like, I'm gonna learn art, and then you're like, okay, Google art fundamentals, and then they're gonna tell you about perspective and like forms and anatomy and value and light and color and tone and all these things, it can be overwhelming. And I know in the beginning when I was like, I'm gonna take art seriously, it was really, really tough to get myself to study these fundamentals because let's be real, it's also boring. Studying fundamentals can be super boring. So here is where your project is going to come in. As you are working on your project, you are going to run into some problems. You're gonna be like, I don't know how to do this thing, and I don't know how to do that thing. And a lot of the times, these problems are related to something fundamental. And so you're gonna use these problems as a guide to figure out what fundamental you need to study. So something I've learned about myself is that I'm actually a very character-driven artist. So as I'm working on my own project and trying to create a series of like original artworks with original characters, it has just exposed how weak AF my fundamentals around anatomy and constructing the human figure are. I'm just like, what have I been doing for the past 11 years? So that's one element. Another element is I'm also more of a painter than I am a draftsman. So when I think about ultimately what I love to create, it's paintings. And so when I think about my practice and what I like to focus on, the kinds of problems that I encounter, it's gonna be around like my painting workflow and figuring out, okay, how do I render this convincingly? So a lot of my practice centers around studying the human figure. So through gesture, construction, and actual anatomy, like what is this muscle called? And things like painting fundamentals, the value, light, how color and light work together, painting workflows, things like that. So that's really what I focus on. I don't spend too much time on things like environments. And if I'm studying perspective, it's as it relates to characters. Because before I'd be like, perspective, okay, learn how to draw buildings in perspective. But because I know right now my focus is characters, if I'm learning perspective, it's going to be in the context of like, okay, how do characters work in perspective? So that's the power of your project. When you encounter problems, it really guides your approach to figuring out how to solve those problems through studying the fundamentals. I think this approach is great, especially if you're like short on time, because it doesn't really feel like throwing spaghetti at the wall and just trying anything and everything and just pulling all the fundamentals together. You're really being targeted, you're really being focused. So I think it's a really efficient use of your time. But it's also really fun because you're building skills in the things that actually matter to you, skills you actually want to learn. When you're learning how to rotate a figure, you know that, oh, I'm going to use this like in my own original artwork. And so that makes it really exciting, and it helps you push through some of the more tedious, repetitive elements of just learning in general. The third tip is to create a sustainable art practice. So in order for us to really see progress with our art, then we need to be consistent. And I find that a practice that you return to on a regular basis is a really great way to do this. Now, consistent doesn't mean same exact effort every single day. Nature has a natural ebb and flow, and you, being a human, also have natural ebbs and flows. We have a circadian rhythm in which our energy fluctuates throughout the day. Because we're all different, that's gonna look different in different times, right? I'm 100% a morning person, but you could be somebody who has your peak energy moments in the afternoon or late at night. The point is to understand yourself and understand how your energy works. And if you're a menstruating woman, you have a whole nother cycle that you need to think about, your infradian rhythm, right? As your energy fluctuates throughout the entire 28-day cycle, or however long your cycle is. But it's really, really important to understand how our natural energy ebbs and flows. We want to build an art practice that takes our natural energy into consideration and works with it, instead of one that works against it. Something that I've found that really helps with this is sort of having like an art practice menu. And how you're going to create this is really by breaking down the various components of your project, or the things that you are going to be working on that help you get to the final result of your project. So ideally, these various components are going to require different levels of energy in order to complete them. So for me in particular, my art practice is really made up of doing relevant studies and also creating original artwork. So when it comes to doing relevant studies, like I said, right now I'm focusing on human anatomy. And so that's like gesture drawing, construction, and then the actual anatomy, learning like what the different things mean. And then I will do painting studies, because like I said, I'm more of a painter than a draftsman. So I don't focus on trying to make these super aesthetically pleasing sketches. I focus on sketching in a way that supports painting. So I'll do a lot of portrait studies, again, because I focus on characters, and, you know, color and light studies on characters. And then there's the original artwork component of it. And that involves thumbnailing, ideating, gathering references, putting it all together, and then rendering and figuring out how to bring that vision to life. So when you've broken things down, you want to really identify, okay, what requires more energy and what requires less energy. So for me, gesture sketching doesn't really require a lot of energy. I see what's on the screen or whatever, and I'm just like copying it. Studies don't require that much energy, but the most cognitively demanding stuff is working on my own original pieces, because I have to design, I have to really think about the character, I have to think about, okay, how do I want to portray this moment, all these different things. So it takes a lot of brain power. So categorizing all the different elements into what requires energy and what requires more energy and what doesn't is really helpful. Because now what I want you to do is I want you to think about the version of you that is really pressed for time. She's functioning, but she's low energy. She's a little bit tired, okay? And I want you to think about what is the least that you can ask this version of yourself. So it could be like, okay, just 5 minutes gesture sketching, right? That is something that I could reasonably do on a day when I'm like, ugh, I just cannot today. Because I can be like, girl, 5 minutes is 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay, fine. So this is less about just a blanket statement like, you must draw every day. No, it's really just about thinking, okay, how does my energy fluctuate? And on the days when I'm really like Nah, what's the least that I can ask of myself? But also you want to pay attention to yourself. Some days you're just going to be like, I can't. And that's okay. That's okay. But when you know that you have these like very bare minimum things that you can always go to, even on the hardest days, that's going to do a lot more for your sense of consistency, and it's going to make it easier for you to show up on a regular basis. The other thing that I really want you to do is to guard your high energy times, your peak energy times fiercely, okay? Because this is the time where you are going to put the more cognitively demanding things that you need to do. Like I said, I am more of a morning person. And so because of that, I tend to put a lot of like my ideating, really difficult, like concept-y, coming up with original ideas kind of stuff in the morning. I also do my writing in the morning because that's when my energy is like at its best. So really do the best that you can to guard your high energy time and put that towards this project that you care about and the elements of it that may be a little bit more challenging, because this is how you show yourself that what you care about is actually important to you. And that's just such a great way to build a positive relationship with yourself. And you're gonna need it, because the art journey, a lot of the times it's you and you. So it's very important we do things to show ourselves that we have our own back and that we're taking ourselves seriously. And the things that are important to us, we are backing it up with action and investing the best of our energy and time into the things we say we care about. So putting all of that together, if you pick a project that you really like, that you're excited about, that you're curious about, that piques your interest, and as you begin to work on this project, you study the fundamentals according to the problems that come up, and you create a practice that is sustainable for you, that you can keep up with, doing this repeatedly over and over again. That's gonna set you up for really improving in your art skills in a meaningful but also fun way. So I hope this video has helped you, and I am cheering you on. May this year be the year where you show yourself that you too can do the cool stuff that you've always admired in other artists and other people that you look up to. So this is the year where you show yourself that you can do it too. I believe in you, and sending you all my love and light. I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.